Throughout history, sages have asserted that there are no accidents in the intricate web of human relationships. Every soul that crosses our path is not merely a passerby, but a mysterious mirror, reflecting with ruthless precision the deeper aspects of our own personality. Often these are the very facets we instinctively try to conceal or ignore. But what happens when these once meaningful connections, instead of bringing harmony and peace, turn into an endless series of conflicts, becoming a source of unbearable emotional exhaustion? It is precisely in such pivotal moments, from the depths of our being, that our unconscious, possessing truly boundless wisdom, begins to send clear, unmistakable signals. This growing unease, this gnawing feeling of emotional discomfort that permeates us, is by no means accidental. On the contrary, it is an urgent, immediate call to action, a call to let go, to free ourselves from what no longer resonates with our true nature, what has lost its authenticity. Yet despite this clamoring inner alarm, human nature often chooses to ignore these vital signs. Why do we resist so stubbornly? The answer lies in an ancient fear of the unknown. We cling to the familiar, to what is known and predictable, even if it causes us unbearable pain. The emptiness that inevitably arises after we let go of something dear seems far more threatening and frightening than the unbearable burden we carry day after day. However, the great psychoanalyst Carl Gustav Jung once revealed a truly powerful insight to the world. This seeming emptiness is not an enemy, not an abyss capable of swallowing us. It is, on the contrary, a sacred, hallowed space, an open invitation to something immeasurably more authentic, profound, and transformative. When a person finally finds the courage and decides to let go, they do not merely free another individual from unseen shackles. First and foremost, they free themselves from trapped emotions, from unrealistic expectations that have weighed heavily for years, and from invisible chains that mercilessly drained their vital energy. This is not just an act of forgiveness or parting, it is the highest manifestation of self-love, a bold and decisive action aimed at prioritizing one's own inner peace and well-being. And those who dare to walk this path will discover something incredible that will forever change their perception of the world and themselves within it. Parting with someone with whom an individual has shared a significant portion of their life is far more profound than an ordinary act. It is a truly transformative process that brings to the surface the most sensitive aspects of human nature, its shadow sides, the bright facets of itself, and that vast psychic space which the great thinker Carl Gustav Jung called the collective unconscious, invisibly guiding an individual's fundamental choices and decisions. Let us imagine for a moment that human existence is like a long road along which one travels, carrying a metaphorical backpack. Every significant relationship an individual experiences contributes to the contents of this bag: vivid emotions, precious memories, unfulfilled expectations, and of course the bitterness of disappointments. At times, unconsciously, a person continues their journey burdened by this accumulated baggage, even when its contents have lost their relevance or usefulness, when its weight becomes so unbearable that it hinders further progress and free movement. However, it is noteworthy that this symbolic backpack does not gain its weight on its own. Whenever an individual stubbornly holds on to familiar patterns or circumstances, even with full awareness that it causes suffering, they are effectively choosing to add extra weight to it. Carl Gustav Jung characterized this phenomenon as the ego's resistance to the necessity of freeing itself from projections that the individual unconsciously transfers onto others. In other words, a person is held back not so much by the other person as by the sum total of their own ideas, deep fears, and unfulfilled hopes that have been projected onto that other. The question often arises, why is letting go so burdensome? The reason is that to let go means to face a gaping void, which for many is associated with irreparable loss, bitter defeat, or agonizing loneliness. However, consider this. What if this seeming emptiness is actually a vitally necessary space where something authentic and amazingly bright can blossom? Every act of renouncing the familiar, though accompanied by pain, serves as a kind of portal to individuation, the process of deeply becoming the person one truly is. Imagine this situation. When someone continues to maintain emotionally draining relationships, there is an inevitable giving away of vital energy to something that has long ceased to resonate with their inner world. This is like trying to continuously fuel a fire that has long gone out. Instead of the desired warmth, such efforts produce only clouds of smoke, create confusion, and sustain a chronic feeling of dissatisfaction. And it is here that one of the most intriguing aspects of Jung's teaching manifests. He asserted that the unconscious constantly communicates with us, sending various signals through dreams, emotional states, and even physical sensations. These manifestations of fatigue, inner discomfort, the feeling that something in life is not right, are by no means accidental. They are the voice of the unconscious, persistently urging us to pay close attention. However, what happens in most cases? Individuals often disregard these important warnings, clinging to the familiar, for it is far more convenient to remain within the known than to take a decisive step into the unknown, even if this familiar has a destructive effect. People prefer to stay in their comfort zone because any changes instill deep fear. This is precisely what makes the act of letting go such a fundamental spiritual act. It is not merely about parting with someone or something, but about embracing one's own authenticity, that genuine version of oneself that is often hidden behind the facade of interpersonal connections. Liberation is not a display of weakness or flight. On the contrary, it is a demonstration of exceptional courage. Imagine for a moment an individual who has taken such a step. Perhaps initially they experience that oppressive emptiness that people so greatly fear. However, over time, this empty space gradually fills with something immeasurably more valuable. A renewed clarity of perception is gained, previously constrained energy is released, and a sense of amazing emotional lightness arises, which radically changes their worldview. It is at this turning point that the true magic of transformation begins. As Jung accurately noted, what we deny consumes us, what we accept transforms us. When an individual realizes that some aspects of their being no longer resonate with their soul, this understanding opens doors for new perspectives, meeting new people, and an influx of energies that are in complete harmony with their true being. Throughout life, human relationships serve as a source of profound lessons about the self, sometimes limiting one's potential, and at other times, on the contrary, contributing to complete liberation. Carl Gustav Jung once noted that a person meets himself in a mirror, and it is in this reflection that it becomes evident. When interactions cease to bring peace and turn into a continuous source of conflicts, such a mirror no longer fulfills its function. It is at this moment that many people find themselves trapped, mistakenly believing that the act of parting or ending a relationship is equivalent to defeat or giving up the fight. However, in reality, the decision to let go is a conscious choice. It is a conscious decision to stop carrying the heavy burden of grievances, fears, and unjustified expectations in order to move forward lightly, striving for what is truly valuable, to achieve one's own inner peace. Imagine the incomparable feeling of relief that overcomes a person when they finally get rid of something completely unnecessary. This can be something as mundane as tidying a cluttered closet, but the sense of space and weightlessness that arises afterward is truly unparalleled. Now imagine this same feeling applied to the emotional and spiritual spheres of life. This is precisely the priceless gift that the practice of letting go offers to a person. However, make no mistake, the process itself is far from easy. It requires the courage to face one's own shadows, those aspects of personality that one often prefers to ignore or hide. Jung taught that these shadows are not enemies, they are integral parts of the human psyche, requiring integration. When a person dares to meet their shadows, they not only experience deep personal growth, but also approach that inner peace that surpasses all previously known ideas of it. In this challenging but liberating journey of letting go, a turning point occurs that completely changes one's usual perception. When a person stops perceiving emptiness as threatening and begins to see it as a clean, untouched canvas, a vast space where something completely new can be built, something deeply resonant with their true essence. As one delves deeper into this process, it becomes evident that it is not only about freeing another individual, but much more importantly, about one's own liberation. It is freedom from the invisible bonds that held one captive, from self-imposed narratives about one's identity and true worth, and finally, freedom to be an authentic, genuine self. Such a transformation extends beyond a simple emotional reaction. It is the deepest spiritual metamorphosis. It is in this context that Carl Gustav Jung left humanity one of his deepest insights. The daring encounter of a person with themselves is one of the greatest acts of courage of which they are capable. And when a person decides to take this fateful step, it is astonishing to discover that the universe begins to act in their favor, as if conspiring to help them. People whose souls are truly in tune with their own begin to appear on their path. Opportunities, previously seeming unattainable or even unthinkable, suddenly become within reach. And most valuable of all, a deep inner peace is born and strengthened within the person, not dependent on external circumstances or other people, but emanating from the deepest depths of their being. This moment marks only the initial stage of the journey. How ready is one for further discoveries regarding the consequences of such a decision as letting go? The act of letting go, it turns out, is not reducible to a simple act of will. It is rather a subtle, almost filigree art. It can be compared to looking at a complex, tightly tied knot, and instead of painfully trying to untie it, deciding to mercilessly cut the connecting threads that hold one captive. However, the question naturally arises, what follows this decisive step? For a significant portion of people, such an act inspires deep dread, for afterward, only a severed end of the rope and a ghostly echo of the long past remain. Nevertheless, the eminent thinker Jung offered a completely different perspective on this very emptiness. For him, it was nothing less than a sacred space in which entirely new, unexplored possibilities could sprout and blossom. It is at this pivotal moment that it becomes absolutely essential to realize that this seeming emptiness is not a hostile force, but, on the contrary, acts as a wise mentor. One can, for example, mentally imagine an absolutely empty room. At first glance, it might give the impression of being abandoned or lifeless. However, upon closer inspection, one begins to grasp the immense potential hidden within it. It is a free space intended for new design, for arranging objects at one's discretion, for filling it with what truly resonates with one's inner world. The principle of letting go is analogous to this process. It is a unique chance for deep self-knowledge, where a person's individuality ceases to be defined by the burden they once carried. Just delve a little deeper into thought. When a person stubbornly continues to remain in connections or relationships that have long lost their nourishing power and ceased to be beneficial, it is akin to aimlessly watering a plant that has long stopped growing and developing. An excess of moisture in such a case only accumulates, causing root rot, and the only result of such persistence is a deep sense of disappointment. However, by resolutely stopping the watering of such a hopeless plant, and much more importantly, allowing oneself the opportunity to plant entirely new shoots, a person effectively opens a path to a garden abundant with life and new possibilities. Jung, the eminent thinker, taught that human relationships are like mirrors, yet they far from always reflect what one would like to see in them. A life partner, a close friend, or even a colleague can reveal not only a person's virtues and strengths, but also their deepest, hidden wounds. Often people mistakenly take love or sincere affection for a safe haven, but the question arises, what happens when this seeming sanctuary suddenly turns into a real prison? Often the chains binding a person are not external, they are internal, formed by years of fears, the heavy burden of guilt and limiting beliefs that a person carries within themselves. When a person decides to break these internal bonds, something truly transformative happens. The process of restoring their own energy begins. This is the very vital force that was previously wasted on endless arguments, on futile attempts to fix what is immutable, or on patiently enduring what caused pain. Now this energy returns to the person like the sun breaking through a thick cloud cover, and its beneficial warmth can be felt directly on the skin. However, there is a certain difficulty. People are not always able to timely recognize the signs indicating the need to free themselves from burdensome connections. Sometimes these signals are barely perceptible, manifesting as unexplained fatigue or a slight internal discomfort that arises every time one thinks of these relationships. In other cases, they become more distinct, expressed in unending conflicts, a complete lack of communication, or an oppressive sense of emptiness that does not disappear no matter how hard one tries to ignore it. Jung described this phenomenon as the language of the unconscious, that sacred inner voice that never ceases, although people unfortunately rarely listen to it. The unwillingness to heed the inner voice often stems from a deeply ingrained fear. The apprehension of being alone, the fear of making a wrong decision, or even the unwillingness to face the genuine emotions one experiences. It is far more comfortable to hold on to the familiar and predictable, even if it causes suffering, because the uncertainty of the future seems far more terrifying. However, such fear is merely a mirage, an artful protective mechanism of the human mind designed to prevent inevitable transformations. Imagine this picture. A person holds tightly to a rope that ties a boat to a secure dock. Initially, the thought of releasing this rope seems completely unthinkable. There is a feeling that if one only loosens the grip, the vessel will irrevocably disappear beyond the horizon, never to be seen again. But what if this very boat is destined for a long journey? What if, by freeing it, one allows the vast ocean to bring something completely new and unexpected? The act of letting go is not just an action. It is the deepest act of faith, but not blind faith in external circumstances, rather an unwavering faith in oneself. It is complete trust in one's own internal resources, a conviction in the strength to meet any coming challenges, and the wisdom to recover from a state of true authenticity. The great thinker Carl Gustav Jung once proclaimed that a person who gazes outward only dreams, whereas one who dares to look inward truly awakens. Such a process of deep self-knowledge can be very uncomfortable, sometimes even painful, yet it is precisely in it that the key to genuine personal transformation lies. On this path of inner exploration, one often has to confront one's own shadows, those aspects of one's essence that one prefers to ignore or not notice at all. These can include deeply hidden feelings of guilt, old resentments, or even a stubborn attachment to an ideal that never existed in reality. However, Jung tirelessly reminded that these shadows are by no means something to be feared. They are like lost pieces of a complex puzzle that, when consciously integrated into the whole personality, allow one to complete the true image of who one truly is. As a person begins to release the burden of the past, they simultaneously notice a profound transformation in their perception of the world. Colors, once seemingly dull and dim, acquire unprecedented brightness. Sounds, previously unnoticed in the general noise, now reveal themselves as an independent, enchanting melody. And even the most insignificant details, be it the unique aroma of freshly brewed coffee or the gentle warmth of sun rays on the skin, are filled with a completely new, deep meaning. This happens because, by letting go of what no longer serves their well-being, an individual releases vast inner space for genuine gratitude and an authentic, deep connection with everything around them. What is even more powerful is that the act of letting go transforms not only the person themselves, but also those in their immediate environment. When an individual makes a conscious decision to prioritize their own inner peace and true essence, they transmit an unambiguous signal to the world. They are worthy of relationships that can nourish their soul, support them on their path, and be in complete harmony with their true nature. It often happens that precisely during this period, those very necessary people begin to appear, and this occurs not due to some mystical intervention, but because, by changing one's own energy, one transforms what one attracts into their life. As the great thinker Carl Gustav Jung aptly noted, "What we resist persists, what we accept transforms us." Such inner transformation rarely happens instantly. It is rather a long process, a true journey, requiring self-compassion and unwavering commitment to one's own development. However, every, even the most insignificant step, steadily brings one closer to that state of balance and inner fullness that they so desire. So, if an individual finds themselves at that point in life where they feel that old foundations are no longer relevant, when the weight of accumulated emotional baggage becomes unbearable, they should remember, liberation is not a loss, it is rather a rebirth, a manifestation of true courage that opens the door to a lighter, more authentic, and undoubtedly freer version of themselves. And when a person decides on this first step, when they finally decide to let go of the past, something subtle but profound changes. It is as if the universe itself begins to realign in their favor, attracting people into their life, opening new opportunities and offering experiences that resonate with that renewed energy developing within. Here arises an important question. Are they ready to take this decisive step? When a person asks whether they are truly ready to let go, they are likely at that very threshold where the mind and heart seem to be engaged in an endless struggle. One part stubbornly clings to the familiar, while the other clearly realizes that by continuing to do so, they sacrifice something priceless, their inner peace. It is in this intermediate space between attachment and complete liberation that the deepest answers are hidden. Carl Gustav Jung called this liminal space, that transitional state in which true transformation occurs. Reflecting on life's path, one can turn to the metaphor of a butterfly. Before this creature can spread its wings and fly, it must go through a process of deep inner transformation, effectively a complete metamorphosis inside a protective cocoon. Everything that constituted the essence of the caterpillar must dissolve and disappear to make way for a completely new form of existence. Is not a similar phenomenon observed in the process of letting go? To let go of something means to give permission for a certain part of one's own personality to undergo metamorphosis, giving way to a more holistic and authentic version of oneself. At times, clinging to relationships that no longer benefit an individual or even become an obstacle is akin to trying to constantly wear shoes that have lost their suitability. Initially, one may tolerate the discomfort, but over time, this incessant pressure begins to drain their strength, leaving deep imprints that are not so easy to erase. Getting rid of such shoes does not mean that the person has failed. On the contrary, it symbolizes granting oneself the right to seek something that much better suits who one is at the present moment. However, the true challenge lies not only in the act of letting go itself, but also in what follows it. In that critical moment when the individual finds themselves face to face with the feeling of emptiness and begins to ask the sacred question, what now? The renowned psychologist Carl Jung asserted that emptiness is not an end point, but, on the contrary, serves as the beginning of new creation. It can be likened to a clean canvas that is not just waiting but actively inviting one to rethink and redraw their life, to fill it with genuine desires, not just what had to be endured. And although initially this state may seem quite frightening, this emptiness, in essence, has its deep purpose. It is in this unlimited space that one begins to notice what previously went unnoticed. Perhaps they will discover a revived, long-forgotten passion, or realize that the most significant and deep relationships in their life were just waiting for them to clear the way for them. This is akin to the process of tidying the dusty attic. At first, only chaos and disorder appear, but with each item or box removed, the true potential of what this space can become gradually emerges. When a person begins to lighten the burden they carried, something remarkable happens. They realize that many of those feelings they attributed to external relationships were actually always their own, inherent in them from the very beginning. Carl Jung, an eminent thinker, taught that true inner work is not about remodeling circumstances or people around, but about a deep reflection on what these life experiences reveal about our own inner essence. A former life partner incapable of commitment, friendly ties that always took more than they gave, or even a family member who constantly trampled on personal boundaries. All these interactions served as a kind of reflective surfaces, mirrors, demonstrating something important that one had to face. As individuals release these bonds, they do not turn away from past companions. Rather, they consciously choose to acknowledge and honor the lessons learned from those interactions, moving forward towards what aligns more harmoniously with their authentic nature. However, this does not mean the path ahead will be unobstructed. There will be moments when one succumbs to doubt, looking back and questioning if the decision made was truly right. But just as surely, days will come filled with an inexpressible lightness, as if one can finally breathe deeply, freed from the weight previously carried. It is in these moments of clarity that one can begin to perceive subtle signals. Perhaps an unexpected conversation with an old friend will offer a fresh perspective, or a serendipitously found book will suddenly reveal the very words needed for understanding. Jung called such phenomena synchronicity, events that seem to perfectly coincide in time and space, mysteriously confirming that the individual is moving in the right direction. Releasing the past does not mean forgetting it or erasing it entirely from memory. Instead, it is a process of deep integration, acknowledging its value for the experience it provided, and allowing oneself to transform without letting it define one's current essence. It is akin to gazing at an old photograph. One can recall the moments lived with deep gratitude, yet clearly recognize the impossibility of remaining in that time and space. Every step taken forward inevitably opens up more room for truly significant aspects of being. The field for developing soul-nourishing relationships expands, more opportunities arise for exploring one's own identity, and the space for that inner peace, which at times seems distant, always remains within reach. As one progresses, noticeable changes begin to occur in their energetic field. It is as if the simple act of prioritizing oneself sends a message to the universe, announcing a readiness to receive what is rightfully deserved. And while these shifts may initially be subtle, it is this transformation that attracts phenomena into life that previously seemed utterly impossible. New, profound connections emerge, unexpected opportunities unfold, and a renewed sense of life's purpose is rekindled. It is crucial to recognize that this journey has no endpoint. Releasing the old is not a one-time event, but rather a habit that is formed and refined throughout life. Each time a person decides to let go of what no longer resonates with their soul, they strengthen their ability to live from a place of authenticity and inner integrity. Can one fail to notice how a river never stops flowing? Despite countless rocks and obstacles encountered along its path, it invariably finds a way to continue its course. This indomitable spirit embodies the act of letting go. It is the unwavering certainty that, no matter what barriers arise, one is always capable of moving forward, constantly renewing oneself, and invariably finding the path to true selfhood. What then is each person ready to release today to free up precious space for what truly matters? When an individual decides to let go of something, they are not merely giving something up. They are taking a step into the unknown, filled with the confidence that something better can certainly emerge. Notably, this process is not limited to the emotional sphere. It profoundly impacts both the physical and spiritual dimensions. One feels the tension fall from their shoulders, and finally, after years of holding their breath, a deep, liberating sigh comes. This action, releasing trapped energy, allows it to be redirected towards what truly fills life and gives it meaning. Imagine holding a glass filled with water. You hold it so tightly and for so long that you barely notice the increasing pain in your fingers. Yet the pain is there, constant, even though you've grown accustomed to it. To let go is akin to setting that glass down, not because it lacks value, but because holding it no longer serves your well-being. Initially, the emptiness in your hands might feel unfamiliar, even uncomfortable, but with time comes the realization there is now space to hold something else, something lighter, something that doesn't deplete your strength. Carl Jung believed that every emotional crisis presents a unique opportunity to reconnect with one's deep, authentic essence. The emptiness an individual sometimes feels in the process of letting go is not a dark, frightening abyss, but rather a gateway to new discoveries. It is in this inner space that answers are found that remained inaccessible while the mind was preoccupied with desperately clinging to the familiar. The noise generated by draining relationships or situations that hinder personal growth can be so deafening that one can barely discern the subtle signals emanating from their own soul. These internal messages usually begin subtly. It might be a slight feeling of discomfort, a persistent recurring thought, or a vague sense that something in life is out of harmony. Ignoring such harbingers can doom a person to an endless cycle of internal conflict and deep exhaustion. However, when the decision is made to listen to these signals, when one gives themselves permission to explore their true meaning, a full picture of their inner world begins to unfold. Jung called this process individuation, the fundamental path by which a person integrates all their disparate parts to become a whole and authentic embodiment of themselves. One can imagine a stretched rope. The longer it is under tension, the more fragile and vulnerable it becomes. If one continues to pull it relentlessly, sooner or later it will inevitably break, and this break will be neither gentle nor benevolent. This is what happens when one stubbornly resists the process of letting go. Instead of conscious and systematic liberation, they experience a sudden and painful rupture that leaves them feeling lost and completely out of control. However, if one makes a conscious decision to loosen this rope by their own will, the entire process becomes significantly more tolerable and, crucially, more compassionate towards oneself. It is fundamentally important to understand that the process of letting go is by no means equivalent to complete oblivion or irreversible erasure of past events. On the contrary, it represents a deep respect for lived experience, a careful extraction of valuable lessons from it, and allowing these lessons to guide the individual towards opening a new page in their life. This process can be compared to carefully closing a read book. One does not discard the work or forget its plot, but merely decides to turn to a different narrative that is more aligned with their current state and inner essence. As one masters the art of letting go, they inevitably begin to identify recurring patterns in their own destiny. It becomes evident that certain behaviors or relationship patterns have cyclically repeated, like a monotonous skipping record. These cyclical repetitions are by no means a result of mere coincidence. The renowned psychologist Carl Jung asserted that everything an individual does not confront consciously inevitably manifests in their life as predetermined fate. In other words, what remains unresolved is inevitably recreated. This is why letting go is not just an act of liberation, but also a profound act of reconciliation with one's personal history. It is at this moment that the true magic of emptiness is revealed. What previously seemed a terrifying and unknown space to the individual now transforms into an extraordinarily fertile ground for the emergence of countless new possibilities. With each passing day, one begins to feel an increasing lightness of being, gaining a deeper connection with their true self. Objects and circumstances that once seemed vital gradually lose their significance, while truly valuable aspects begin to radiate dazzling clarity. It is as if the entire world suddenly fills with unknown doors, each patiently awaiting its opening. As one progresses through this profound process, they inevitably realize that they are not alone. All humanity throughout centuries has faced the fundamental challenge of letting go, manifesting in countless forms. Every line of poetry, every melody of a song, every work of art capable of touching the heart eloquently speaks of this same inner journey. There is a universal, unbreakable connection inherent in the act of letting go, comparable to a collective dance in which everyone participates, often without even realizing its rhythm. And in this symbolic dance, the individual learns to trust the inner rhythm of life, to accept that every ending contains the seed of a new beginning. The renowned thinker Jung asserted that what one fears most to confront holds the greatest potential for deep transformation. Letting go, therefore, appears not only as a manifestation of fearlessness, but also as a genuine act of faith in an unknown future. The question, in essence, is not so much about one's ability to let go, but rather about what precisely can unfold on the other side of this decisive step. When a person decides to take this inner leap, something deep within them begins to transform. Initially, these changes may be barely perceptible, but their impact is incredibly powerful. This feeling can be compared to every cell in the body awakening, remembering what life was like before the individual took on burdens that were not originally theirs. Jung emphasized the importance of integrating lessons learned from the past, but cautioned against dragging them along like heavy chains. Such integration does not mean remaining attached to what has already happened, but rather implies gaining true freedom to move confidently towards what can be. Imagine walking on a forest path. With each step, your path is crossed by stones that have lain there for years. These could be relationships that have long drained your vital energy, or an unfulfilled promise, or a dream that has lost its former resonance and no longer stirs your heart. Each such stone serves as a silent reminder of something that once held great significance but now merely hinders further progress. The act of letting go is a conscious action to bend down, pick up this stone, and make a firm decision that there is no longer a need to carry its weight. Such a process does not merely change one's internal perspective, it profoundly transforms the individual's energetic field. When freed from all that once weighed them down, the individual begins to vibrate at an entirely different frequency. This is why people they once attracted, who perhaps were not in full harmony with them, gradually begin to drift away. This happens not because something went wrong, but because the old energy they shared simply ceases to exist. And in this newfound space, free from old ties, new, more resonant relationships are given a chance to flourish. Carl Gustav Jung asserted that every relationship represents a constant exchange of energy, a continuous flow between two individuals. However, when this flow is blocked, when it transforms into relentless struggle and conflict, the unconscious actively begins to send alarm signals. Sometimes these signals manifest subtly. It might be an inexplicable fatigue, a persistent lack of enthusiasm, or a general decline in vitality. In other cases, they become crystal clear like pure water, frequent arguments, increasing emotional detachment, or even an overwhelming feeling of inner emptiness that cannot be ignored. These signals are not random coincidences, they serve as an internal compass, guiding the individual on what they need to do to regain harmony with their true self. However, people often disregard these harbingers because the necessity of letting go forces them to confront an uncomfortable reality. They have invested significant resources, time, emotional attachment, and vital energy into something they now have to release. Such an outcome might be perceived as a defeat, yet the distinguished thinker Carl Gustav Jung offered a different perspective. For him, any life experience, even if it comes to its logical conclusion, represents a valuable opportunity for growth, being an integral element in the mosaic of individual development and personal evolution. The anxiety associated with the need to let go often stems from a feeling of uncertainty. People instinctively cling to the familiar, believing that the resulting emptiness will be unbearable and devastating. But what if this very emptiness is not merely an absence, but precisely the necessary condition that will allow the individual to discover something entirely new within themselves? Jung emphasized that true personal transformation often occurs precisely during periods of maximum uncertainty, in those liminal states when one feels lost, but simultaneously gains inner freedom for deep self-exploration. This created emptiness, despite its discomfort, carries a profound meaning and purpose. It can be compared to land left after a powerful storm. Initially, it seems desolate and lifeless, yet with time, this very cleared soil transforms into an ideal environment for the genesis and vigorous growth of something entirely new and viable. And it is in this special space that the individual begins to discover facets and possibilities within themselves that previously remained hidden, buried under the weight of others' expectations and external demands. Perhaps one realizes their much greater inner resilience and endurance than they had supposed, or uncovers a long-forgotten or stubbornly ignored passion that was waiting for its moment. When an individual embarks on exploring these uncharted territories, something truly wonderful begins to happen. Existence, previously perceived as an endless routine of obligations and exhausting fatigue, gradually reclaims the characteristics of an exciting adventure. Each new day becomes a priceless opportunity to purposefully choose what one wishes to see in their life, instead of simply passively accepting everything that external circumstances present. It is extremely important to recognize that the process of letting go is by no means a linear movement. There will be days when one is filled with bright hope, and others when they will look back with deep, poignant longing. However, even during these periods of uncertainty and reflection, an unquenchable inner strength exists within them, steadily pushing them forward. The renowned thinker Jung described this phenomenon as the impulse to individuation, an inherent, innate need for every individual to realize their true potential, to become who they are meant to be. As the individual progresses along this path of transformation, they begin to discover that something has profoundly changed in their perception of reality. The world's hues gain unprecedented vibrancy, sounds become crystal clear, and previously unnoticed charms of existence, such as the invigorating aroma of freshly brewed coffee or the melodious singing of a bird, suddenly turn into valuable, unexpected gifts. This transformation occurs not because the external world has changed, but solely because the person themselves has transformed. The act of letting go is not limited to merely freeing oneself from someone's influence or a situation. It represents a much deeper process during which one sheds the shackles of internal narratives they have told themselves about their identity and what they believe they deserve. They allow themselves to become an unblemished canvas, ready to embrace fresh impressions, meet new people, and explore hitherto unknown manifestations of connection. And although this path may be fraught with difficulties, every action taken steadily leads them to the inner peace they have always so persistently sought. Because ultimately, letting go is not only an act of liberation, but also a powerful, solemn declaration of deep love for one's own self. It is an inner conviction that one is worthy of an existence that harmoniously resonates with their true essence, a life that is truly their own, authentic. The fundamental question lies in how one will utilize the inner space they create by letting go. When an individual begins to recognize this area, previously appearing empty, they grasp a powerful truth: there is no need to rush. We live in a society that relentlessly pushes for immediate replacement, for seeking new things, for filling any absence, just to avoid feeling silence. However, true growth occurs precisely when one allows themselves to reside in this inner emptiness, when they enable silence to reveal what they truly need, instead of continuing to pursue what they believe should be. Jung, the great thinker, often asserted that wisdom is gained not through accumulation, but through letting go. By releasing something, one not only lets go of what held them back, they also open up vast space for the emergence of profound questions. Who am I when I am not defined by this relationship? What does true peace mean to me? What do I want to build next? These are certainly not easy questions, but it is in their answers that the clarity capable of transforming an individual's entire life is found. Imagine that the human mind is like a vast lake. When an individual is involved in relationships or circumstances that are not in harmony with their inner essence, this metaphorical lake is constantly agitated, its surface covered with ripples and its depths gripped by turbulence. However, as soon as one lets go of what weighs them down, the water's surface gradually begins to calm. In the ensuing serenity, it becomes possible to clearly discern what lies at the very bottom, everything that was previously masked by continuous movement and chaos. Such clarity leads one to a deep realization. True aspirations and sought-after values do not reside in the external world, be it relationships, professional achievements, or even the most cherished dreams. All these are merely reflections of what is already contained within each person. By freeing themselves from what no longer serves their well-being, the individual is as if removing a thick veil that prevented them from seeing their true potential. The famous psychologist Carl Jung characterized this process as the awakening of the true self, a pivotal moment when one stops seeking external validation and begins to fully trust their inner voice. It is important to note that such a path of self-discovery by no means promises ease, nor does it exempt one from the necessity of confronting their own shadows. Letting go of everything that has ceased to be beneficial is, in essence, an invitation to carefully examine those aspects of life that have proven dysfunctional. For example, it is not unlikely that the fear of loneliness held one in unions that brought neither joy nor true satisfaction. It should be remembered, these internal shadows are not adversaries, rather they serve as wise guides, pointing to those areas of the soul that still require deep healing. Imagine these shadows as a long-locked, dark room that has remained inaccessible for many years. When one finally decides to open its door, the first thing that appears to their sight is only chaos, disorder, and a thick layer of accumulated dust. However, as they dare to venture deeper, something more valuable begins to emerge. Precious memories, important life lessons, and even individual fragments of their own personality that rightfully deserve to be integrated into their conscious life are discovered. Confronting these previously hidden parts of oneself not only contributes to deep healing, but also allows for the restoration of the vital energy that was previously constrained and trapped within through denial or paralyzing fear. During this healing process, one discovers something truly amazing. They are not as alone as they might have seemed. Individuals who genuinely care for them and value them highly begin to appear in their environment in the most unexpected ways. It is as if the conscious decision to prioritize one's own inner peace and authenticity begins to attract those whose vibrations align with their own. This phenomenon resonates with one of Carl Jung's deepest teachings, which states, by transforming internally, one inevitably changes what they attract into their external reality. As the individual delves deeper into this inner journey, they also begin to reevaluate the very concept of love. They cease to perceive it as something that must be conquered or held onto at all costs, like a trophy. Instead, there comes an understanding that true love does not make demands, does not drain vital energy, and does not compel sacrifices that go against one's true essence. Love in its purest form appears as a free and unhindered flow of energy that elevates and inspires rather than constraining or limiting. And this reflection naturally leads to a fundamental question. What does it truly mean to love without attachment? For Jung, as is known, attachment represented a certain form of projection, a way of clinging to what one believed the other individual represented. However, when one frees themselves from this projection, they gain the ability to love in a way that does not imply possession or comprehensive control over the other. To love without attachment is by no means equivalent to indifference. It is rather a deep respect for the other person and for oneself, allowing both to grow and develop even if their paths ultimately diverge. When an individual reaches a certain inner milestone, they begin to clearly notice how their surrounding reality undergoes significant transformations. Prospects that once seemed inaccessible or too distant gain tangible closeness. Conversations that once drained energy and caused fatigue now provide a surge of life-giving power. Even the challenges and difficulties encountered are perceived as much less oppressive as one is no longer burdened by what fundamentally does not belong to them. This can be likened to a profound message from life itself, as if it proclaims, this is what happens when one allows themselves to be authentic, to be who they truly are. Such a state does not herald the arrival of absolute perfection or the absence of difficulties, but it undoubtedly means that the individual is better prepared for any future events, and that they will act from a position of true selfhood and unshakable inner strength. On this challenging but beneficial path, one also clearly realizes that there is no need to rush. The process of letting go is not bound by strict time frames. It is not a final goal to be conquered by a specific deadline, but rather a permanent state. It is a multi-layered, gradual process, unfolding layer by layer, much like peeling an onion. Layers shed, parts released, each brings an individual closer to their core, that sacred part of their being which has always known what is truly needed for authentic inner peace and harmony. As we delve deeper into understanding what the process of letting go truly entails, it's crucial to remember its essence lies not in achieving perfection, but in unwavering forward movement. in constant progress. Every step, no matter how small, taken on this path, every moment one consciously chooses inner peace over external or internal conflict, brings them closer to the life they have always deserved. Should you ever question if these efforts are worth the resources expended, simply close your eyes and take a deep, measured breath. In that moment you can feel the subtle lightness already beginning to develop within, the clarity of thought gradually piercing through the veil of past anxieties, for it is in this breath, in this brief moment of genuine connection with yourself, that the long-awaited answer to all doubts resides. Every deep breath taken on this challenging yet liberating journey of letting go serves as undeniable confirmation that you are moving forward, even if your steps sometimes seem barely noticeable or uncertain. This serves as a constant reminder that true change doesn't happen instantly, overnight. However, each conscious decision to release something forms a new, solid foundation. Upon this foundation, something truly significant and lasting can later be built, something that will give life new meaning. Imagine for a moment someone living in a house where they have spent many years of their life. The walls of this dwelling are densely covered with old photographs. Every piece of furniture holds invisible traces of days gone by, and the very space is permeated with countless memories. However, as time passes, this person begins to notice that the once cozy home feels more like an overwhelming burden than a safe haven. Every corner of this space is cluttered with things that have long ceased to be useful, but which are terrifying to part with, as they seemingly embody integral parts of one's own history. The decision to release this burden is comparable to someone opening the windows of their inner world for the first time in a long while, allowing streams of sunlight and vital air to penetrate, thereby clearing space for the emergence of something entirely new. Such an unveiling does not imply complete oblivion of past events or their erasure from memory. On the contrary, it symbolizes a profound awareness of past experiences, genuine gratitude for the valuable lessons learned from them, and the subsequent conscious release of everything that has lost its relevance and ceased to carry meaning. As the distinguished psychoanalyst Carl Gustav Jung noted, true personal growth occurs not through neglecting or ignoring the past, but through the deep integration of all lived experience into the overall structure of the personality. Thus, by letting go of the old, an individual does not reject their history. They merely extract wisdom and invaluable lessons from it, leaving behind the excessive, burdensome weight that no longer serves their development. Incredible power is unleashed the moment a person makes the firm decision that they deserve a lighter, more authentic life, aligned with their true nature. This feeling is akin to the universe itself beginning to respond to this inner transformation, directing various signs, new people, and unique opportunities toward the individual, which surprisingly resonate with this renewed, positive energy. It is quite possible that someone who previously seemed inaccessible or extremely distant will suddenly appear nearby, or that a person will rediscover a long-forgotten passion capable of bringing joy and inspiration. Such coincidences are by no means simple accidents. They represent the phenomenon that Carl Gustav Jung defined as synchronicity, meaningful moments. When a person's inner world and external circumstances align in perfect harmony to indicate the correct direction on their life path. However, even amidst the most encouraging omens that can point the way, moments of deep doubt may inevitably arise. The process of liberating oneself from the burden of the past, of letting go of what no longer serves one's well-being, is never a linear path. On the contrary, it often resembles a winding road where one is sometimes tempted to look back and question whether the decision made was truly correct. During such challenging periods, self-compassion acquires a special vital significance. One should allow themselves to experience the full spectrum of emotions, not hesitating to shed tears, and give themselves the necessary time to deeply process accumulated experiences. When an individual makes a conscious decision to free themselves from what has ceased to be beneficial, it concerns not only their external relationships with others, but equally importantly, how they begin to relate to themselves. It is then that a person starts to realize how long they have allowed certain external dynamics and others' evaluations to determine their self-worth, how easily they handed over the reins of their personal happiness to others. However, by engaging in the act of letting go, an individual does not merely free themselves from the shackles of the past, they effectively restore and reclaim this lost inner power. This process can be compared to meticulously cleaning a long fogged mirror. For the first time in years, it becomes possible to clearly discern one's own reflection, and in this newfound clarity, something truly beautiful emerges. The individual embarks on a fundamental re-evaluation of what happiness truly means for them personally. The core of the matter is no longer reduced to merely conforming to external expectations or desperately clinging to some preconceived idea of what their life must be. Instead, the focus shifts to the deliberate cultivation of deep moments of inner peace, genuine connection with oneself and the surrounding world. It creates a feeling as if life, which once seemed unbearably complex and tangled, suddenly becomes significantly simpler, lighter, and most importantly, much more real. As an individual progresses along their life path, they also begin to realize that the process of letting go of the old influences not only their present, but also their future. Every conscious decision to release what no longer resonates within one's soul inevitably creates space for attracting what truly aligns with their inner nature. This process is like a full-flowing river that can finally carry its waters unimpeded, bringing with it everything necessary for nourishment and continued growth. And, although the path may sometimes seem exhausting and steep, it is crucial to remember that every stage traversed holds profound significance. Every moment of vulnerability, every display of courage, every time a person prioritizes their own well-being, they are steadily building a life that is a true reflection of their inner essence. Among other things, this internal process awakens in a person a trust in something greater than themselves. As the distinguished thinker Carl Gustav Jung noted, there is a deep interconnectedness between the conscious and unconscious realms, and it is this dynamic interaction that guides a person toward their true purpose. By liberating themselves from the burden of the past, one ceases to struggle against the powerful current of life and allows themselves to glide within its natural inherent rhythm. And in this gentle, flowing current, a tranquility is found that is not conditioned by external circumstances or the influence of other people. A peace, stemming from deep inner harmony with oneself. What boundless prospects emerge on the horizon now that an individual has allowed themselves to break the chains that held them in place. As one delves into exploring this new dimension, unfolding through the process of letting go, they clearly realize that something profoundly transformative is occurring. It is akin to relearning a language that was always known but entirely forgotten. This language is the language of an individual's true essence, a deep connection to their most profound being, which is independent of external circumstances or the subjective opinions of others. Carl Jung, the distinguished thinker, asserted that within humans there is a deeply rooted inherent need to search for the meaning of existence, to acquire a kind of inner compass capable of guiding them through life's diverse trials and tribulations. In this context, the process of letting go is not merely an act of liberation from something, but a significant stage on the path to discovering one's authentic purpose. It serves as a reminder that an individual's essence is not determined by the nature of their interpersonal connections, the scale of their achievements, or the bitterness of their failures, but solely by how they choose to react to these inevitable circumstances. Imagine a person's life as a vast, unoccupied field, where every choice they make is like a carefully sown seed. When an individual clings to what no longer benefits them or aligns with their true aspirations, it is akin to allowing weeds to grow uncontrollably, consuming valuable life space and hindering healthy growth. However, when a conscious decision is made to release this burden, the soil is prepared for the inception and vibrant flourishing of something entirely new and genuinely beautiful. This can manifest as a promising project, the formation of interpersonal connections that more harmoniously resonate with one's inner world, or even the attainment of that previously elusive feeling of inner peace and serenity. A deeply rooted fear of future uncertainty often constrains a person's will, hindering their movement on this path of transformation. The question that frequently arises is, how can one relinquish what is familiar and known, even if it is understood to bring pain and suffering? The solution lies not in futile attempts to rigidly control future events, but in a profound trust that the natural course of the process will guide the individual to where they are meant to be. This is truly an act of deep faith, not irrational, mindless trust, but faith founded on the unshakable conviction that the decisions being made are dictated by genuine self-love and authentic inner essence. It is at this moment that the individual discovers a truly unexpected gift, a feeling of profound gratitude. As a person gradually releases what no longer serves their development, they begin to feel true appreciation for their entire life journey, even for the most severe and challenging trials. Those events that left noticeable scars on the soul now appear in an entirely different light. These traces of the past cease to be symbols of weakness. On the contrary, they become powerful reminders of the inexhaustible capacity of the personality to overcome difficulties, assimilate valuable lessons, and continuously improve. Carl Jung, a distinguished thinker, often referenced the symbol of the hero, viewing it as a powerful metaphor for a deep personal journey. When a person decides to let go of the old, they effectively embark on their own heroic path, where they must confront their deepest fears, explore their inner shadows, and ultimately return with a renewed and more profound understanding of their own essence. Notably, this transformative journey has no clearly defined final destination, yet every step taken steadily brings them closer to the person they are destined to become. Over time, a person also comes to realize that this important act of letting go extends not only to their own life, but also affects those around them. By giving unconditional priority to their personal well-being, the individual thereby demonstrates and models an entirely new paradigm of relationships, founded on the unshakable principles of deep respect and genuine reciprocity. As a result, the connections that remain in their life after the process of letting go become significantly more authentic, acquire greater balance, and, most importantly, become truly free. And in this equilibrium, a person discovers a level of peace that previously might have seemed completely unattainable. This peace does not depend on all aspects of life being absolutely perfect. It stems from a deep knowledge that one is living in complete harmony with their inner essence. With each new day, the act of letting go transforms into a continuous and deepening practice. It is not a singular action that is performed and then forgotten, but rather a habit that one carefully cultivates to attain a life filled with greater ease, clarity, and conscious purpose. Gradually, the understanding emerges that existence is a constant cycle of liberation and acceptance, and that every time a person chooses to release something, they open doors to new and unexplored possibilities. Thus, continuing this path, an important question arises: what new horizons is a person ready to explore now that they have freed themselves from the chains that previously bound them? Every step taken forward, every conscious decision to let go, acts like a compass that slowly but surely adjusts the direction of movement toward the goal that has always awaited its time. The most appealing facet of this transformative process is the circumstance that, despite the initial feeling of loss or deprivation of something significant, one actually frees up space for what is vitally necessary. This is akin to disparate elements of a complex puzzle, which previously seemed completely incompatible, suddenly beginning to fall into their rightful place as if by magic. Carl Gustav Jung, who deeply explored the human psyche, emphasized that the unconscious possesses unique mechanisms capable of guiding an individual toward their true, authentic essence. At times, these guiding threads manifest in the form of vivid dreams, subtle intuitive insights, or even minor everyday occurrences that awaken something profound within the personality. When a person allows themselves to listen attentively to these barely perceptible signals, they begin to clearly discern hidden patterns and experience moments of crystalline clarity that shed light on what previously seemed utterly confusing and impenetrable. Such a liberation can be compared to an act of letting go, meticulously cleaning a fogged-up pane of glass. granting the ability to clearly and unambiguously perceive what was always before one's eyes. One can imagine a situation where a person is moving along a winding mountain path. Initially, this path is literally strewn with sharp stones, fallen tree trunks and thorny bushes, all creating seemingly insurmountable obstacles that make each step exhausting and requiring colossal effort. However, as the individual persistently moves forward, consciously shedding everything superfluous and unnecessary, the path gradually clears, becoming significantly clearer and much smoother. The principle of letting go functions in an absolutely analogous way. Every emotional burden, every weight that a person consciously leaves behind allows them to continue their life journey with incomparably greater ease, while feeling that each subsequent step becomes more confident, firm, and, undoubtedly, safer. This sensation of weightlessness manifests not only in the mind, but throughout the entire body. A person may notice their breathing becoming deeper, tension easing from their shoulders, or a once constant knot in their stomach now dissolving without a trace. It seems as though the physical body responds to emotional liberation, adapting to this new reality that the person themselves creates. And while experiencing these internal changes, an even deeper understanding emerges. They are not bound by decisions made in the past. Carl Jung believed that life represents a continuous flow of transformations, and every moment offers a person the opportunity to make a new choice. Letting go is not about completely forgetting what was, but rather a respectful attitude toward that experience, coupled with the awareness that there is always an inner strength to create something entirely new. This leads to a powerful realization. What does it truly mean to start with a clean slate? For some, such a notion might sound like a daunting challenge, an empty sheet of paper that inspires trepidation when filling it. However, for others, it serves as a reminder that each new day carries the chance to re-evaluate true values, to build one's life from a state of authenticity and profound purpose. It should always be remembered that such a life path does not necessarily have to be traversed in complete isolation. True, unbreakable bonds, those individuals who remain by one's side, providing support and inspiration, serve like guiding lights, brightly illuminating the road ahead. When a person learns to let go, they not only open up space for the emergence of fresh perspectives, but also create favorable conditions for the development of deep, enriching relationships designed to nourish their spirit and elevate their being. Consider a tree during autumn. Its leaves fall to the ground, not due to wilting or decay, but because it diligently prepares fertile ground for another cycle of growth. The branches, recently lush and full of greenery, now appear bare, yet in this visible nakedness lies the great promise of impending renewal. The process of letting go in a person is quite similar to this natural phenomenon. Everything one releases from their life is nothing other than meticulous preparation for what is inevitably to come, a period of true flourishing that may perhaps still remain beyond their imagination. Such a flourishing does not necessarily have to be grand or instantaneous. It can very well manifest in small but profound expressions of joy, in a rich conversation, in a sunset one pauses to thoughtfully admire, or even in a simple but all-encompassing feeling of peace upon waking. These moments, though they may seem insignificant at first glance, serve as clear indications that the personality is aligning and finding harmony with what is truly important in its existence. The renowned thinker Jung instructed that deep introspection, the act of confronting one's inner aspects and innermost fears, is the path that leads a person to a more meaningful and holistic life. However, he also specifically emphasized that this inner work should not be isolated or agonizing. This serves as an important reminder that even in the most challenging and stressful periods of existence, there is a certain special beauty in the process itself, a beauty that gradually unfolds when a person allows their authentic essence to manifest freely outwardly. As an individual continues to advance along their chosen path, the pertinent question that inevitably arises concerns not what is left in the past, but rather what is being created within the expanse of the newly acquired space. For this space is by no means a vacuum. Instead, it represents a boundless field for creativity, a canvas abundant with potential. It is within this vast space that the individual discovers how past attachments gradually dissolve, and the current moment, the present, gains its true power. There is no haste in this process. There is only a deep conviction that every decision aimed at self-liberation invariably brings the individual closer to their authentic essence. Omens begin to manifest, not as final verdicts or exhaustive answers, but rather as subtle whispers that encourage the exploration of uncharted horizons. What has been released no longer exerts pressure, and in its place, the newfound space is filled with diverse prospects that remain unknown for now, yet gradually begin to unfold before one's eyes. It is in this state of weightlessness, this acquired lightness, that the realization comes that what was previously perceived as an ending is, in reality, merely the prelude to everything that is yet to